Hello and welcome to an introduction to the symbolic frame, the final frame of the multi-frame theory. And as always, the video is meant to introduce you to the concepts that you can learn more about through reading the textbook, as well as looking at the larger PowerPoint presentation on Blackboard, and then preparing for class discussions, and lastly, of course, applying these concepts in deeper ways and with specific examples on the class assignments. So you will remember that the first two frames, the structural and the human resource frames, are sort of the everyday frames of leadership. Most problems can involve solutions in these two frames, and these are the typical frames that leaders will start considering options in and will start seeing reality through. And while all good, effective managers and leaders need to be comfortable in those two frames, it's the last two, the political frame that we covered last time and the symbolic frame today, that really have more kick, we might say, that have more potential impact to lead a team and organization effectively when they're used at the right moment and in the correct ways. So what I want to do in the next 15 minutes is introduce the symbolic frame, what is it, and then how to lead effectively through it. And leading effectively in the symbolic frame involves two main processes, and both of these processes center on culture. So the first process is to understand and build meaningful culture through effective use of symbols. Produce several ways of using symbols effectively in order to understand and build culture. And then the second symbolic process is that leaders need to coordinate the drama that exists in organizational life. So by way of quick example, we all are probably aware of this symbol on the CBU campus. It's the Lancer that was installed a couple of years ago in front of the event center where we hold athletic events and chapel and a lot of different ceremonies and celebrations on campus. And the picture below is one of a CBU graduation that occurs at the end of a student's time here at CBU. These two images give us a good example of the symbolic frame in action on the CBU campus. So this first image of the Lancer is one that incoming students often see on their first visit to campus. It's also what new students touch on their way into campus the first day of the fall semester each year. And just as importantly, it's what they touch on their way into the event center in preparation for this graduation ceremony at the end of their degree at CBU. So if CBU does it well, students, when they see this symbolic image, will remember their time here at CBU, will remember the meaning that occurred and the deep influence it had on their lives and their professional development. And then the time of graduation is an enacting out of that meaning that has occurred in the last couple of years for the grad degree or 4 or 5 years for the undergrad student experience. So there we see the symbol as representative of the culture at CBU that culminates in a drama of graduation that celebrates that very culture in action. So the leader operating well in the symbolic frame inspires those around them. And not only that, the leader who builds effective culture and the management team that carries out effective drama that reinforces that positive, strong culture produces meaning in the lives of those who are in the organization, and that meaning inspires people in a way that motivates them to continue living out the values and the symbolic culture of the organization itself. So as another reminder of this slide of what it looks like to be both effective and ineffective in each of the frames, your textbook gives the image of the eye to the symbolic frame. For me, I just think of the Shakespearean metaphor that the eye is the window to the soul, and this connects with the idea that the symbolic frame focuses on the soul of the organization, or what types of things inspire and lead to meaning within the organization. So for those who may have scored high in the symbolic frame, of course, this is intuitive to you and everything I've said so far makes complete sense. And for those who might have scored lower in the symbolic frame on the first class assessment that we did, pay attention to what these images of the leader look like when they're both effective and ineffective. First, the effective symbolic leader looks like a prophet and a poet as they inspire and create meaning through building strong culture and enacting appropriate drama. The prophet often uses vision to see future possibilities for a team or an organization in ways that others just don't always see. And a prophet can set appropriate strategy even in the middle of complex or unknown environmental conditions, and can see clearly and lead according to the vision even when others might not see the same thing and even disagree. And a poet operating effectively can tell stories and can give the appropriate words in a way that comforts and reassures and supports the overall values of the organization in the right time and in the right way, using appropriate words sometimes, or even symbols that go beyond words. Conversely, a leader who might be unwilling to see reality in the structural frame, or who is ineffective in creating culture and effective, meaningful drama, can be perceived as disingenuous and insincere, or even worse, as a charlatan, a fake. That's another way of saying a fake, or even a hypocrite, or a fanatic who doesn't really have a vision like a prophet does of seeing future possibilities of the organization as its best self, but is engaged in a mirage or smoke and mirrors that's almost deceptive in its attempt to create some sort of meaning, but that meaning is disingenuous or is not aligned with the core values of the actual organization. So for those who need to see examples, because this isn't quite clicking yet, let's give some. First, just to contrast the symbolic frame with some of the other frames, Simon Sinek here gives a quote that shows us the symbolic nature of words. And he says, MLK Jr. gave the "I have a dream" speech, not the "I have a plan" speech. So this idea that in the symbolic frame, words often provide meaning, and it's not necessarily the words that are said, but it's the underlying meaning and value that we give the words that leaders and key people in the organization say. So another quote showing the power and the value of words and culture in the structural frame. This is kind of the leadership guru Peter Drucker. His idea that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So this quote is for those of you who are very strong in the structural frame, not to minimize the importance of leading in the structural frame. Remember, that's a typical frame for daily life effectiveness in organizations. But this quote forces us to remember that even the best strategies can fail during times of uncertainty or confusion if our culture is not strong and positive, and if it doesn't bring meaning to the people who are on the team. So here's a quick example from a couple years ago of how words matter, and the type of culture that leaders create can say a lot more than any particular strategy or plan that those organizations might put out, either internally to the people on the team or externally to those who are watching. You can spend more time reading these quotes on your own, but for now we have two commissioners of professional U.S. sport leagues, Adam Silver of the NBA, Roger Goodell of the NFL. Both of them responded a couple of years ago when, specifically in the NFL, players were protesting, first Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers, and then many others of his colleagues started kneeling during the national anthem, as you remember, in protest of police violence, specifically to African Americans in the U.S. I use these two quotes for you to read and see and to discern which commissioner is using words in the symbolic frame more effectively, do you think? And which frame might the other commissioner, who's not as effective, giving meaning and symbolism to the words, which frame might that commissioner be operating in? So in these examples, both of them use words to reinforce a certain culture. My point is, one of the commissioners uses words to inspire and to reinforce and demonstrate values that lead to a different type of meaning for people involved. And let's just say it, the NBA seems to be enforcing values that are more diverse and more inclusive of both players and management, and ultimately more inspiring to everyone within the organization. But just to let Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, off the hook here, it looks like he's grown in his ability to use words in the symbolic frame in the last couple of years. So the first quote from the last slide was from 2018, and here's a quote from just a couple of days ago as of the recording of this video that shows the response again of both commissioners related to the ongoing protests in response to police violence that's occurring right now in the United States. And notice this time in Goodell's comments how much more potentially inspiring they could be, not just to administration and the owners of each NFL franchise, but the players and the Players Association, and even the fans who want to go see the NFL games in the fall. So now that we have a grasp of the symbolic frame, let's get into these details of building culture through symbols and then enacting drama. So symbols are the building blocks of culture. They send powerful and emotional messages, and they're especially effective during times of ambiguity or complexity that occur either inside an organization or outside in the world at large. So symbols are the building blocks of culture. Well, what then is culture? Your book uses a pretty straightforward definition. Of course, there are many definitions of culture, but the book says that culture includes shared assumptions that groups learn while solving problems, and importantly, these assumptions and this problem-solving process is taught to new members. Simple way to remember culture is how we do things around here, whether it's on, a college volleyball team or at Nike headquarters or Apple headquarters as they make, sport performance technology like the new Apple Watch. Another good idea related to culture is that often in an organization, culture is both a process of solving problems, using values and using the skills and talents and abilities of people in your organization, but then that process leads to a product, accumulated wisdom or success from solving problems the right way, winning games on the road when it matters, or to use a classroom example, teachers having success teaching remotely in the middle of a health pandemic, and then getting the product of feeling successful through accomplishing goals and even the vision of the school, even under stressful, dynamic, complex conditions like a pandemic. An example here of building culture as both process and product would be Coach John Wooden's famous pyramid of success, where the product is success, and that comes through a process of being the best you can be by taking on these characteristics and personality and behaviors and character that works up to higher levels that ultimately lead to competitive greatness. And this process and this outcome both worked together to produce what John Wooden called success. Culture is built primarily through symbols, and symbols can be first images, but then even more, they can be processes that occur in organizational life, and they can be people. So a symbol first can be images that convey values and the larger culture for a particular organization. A quick look at all of these symbols can convey very different levels of meaning, and values, both good and bad, both positive and negative. Some quick examples here: the image of the current Pope Francis and sort of the new way that he's leading the Catholic Church. Certainly not changing a bunch of tradition, but emphasizing certain values in different ways than the previous popes. Things like service and humility. Here he's washing the feet of convicted criminals, I believe, but the idea that this image shows very clearly the value that all people are created in God's image, and that even the Pope isn't above washing the feet of people who would be considered by many others to be lower than the Pope. The point of these images is that they're tools to clearly communicate strong values, and you go around to each of these, maybe even especially this one, and it communicates strong, sometimes evil or negative historical values just through an image. The Olympic image here showing the connectedness of all of the world's contents joined together to celebrate some of the best in humanity every 4 years through sport. But images aren't the only effective communicators of culture. Some more examples of symbols that create culture are vision, values, and myths. So vision is important in at least a few frames: the political frame, the human resource, and now the symbolic. But the vision operating symbolically here projects an image of the organization into the future and says to people involved in the organization, this is a feasible picture of what we could look like. It's realistic, and it's projected into the future, so that if we continue to operate according to our values and beliefs and culture, then we can accomplish big and meaningful things. And the vision says this is exactly what it would look like. Values can then take that vision and specify how people act and what core beliefs they operate under as they accomplish the vision. So a quick military example that should be familiar to most of us is the Marine Corps of Semper Fi. This deep-seated idea that Marines are known for being ever faithful, always faithful to the cause and to the mission and to the people, the brothers and sisters that they do life with and who are their fellow soldiers. The point about vision and values, though, is that the organization should be careful to live them out consistently, because people within the team and outside of the team are watching. And any inconsistency in living out the values can threaten the strength and the meaning associated with those values. Finally here, myths tell stories about people, heroes, acting out the values in order to accomplish the vision. And sometimes these stories can be so powerful that they transcend the organization itself, so that myths that are told well can feel truer than truth, your book says. For example, anyone who's a baseball fan is familiar with the curse of the Bambino, this supposed curse that followed the Boston Red Sox around for more than 110 years or so. So quickly, the myth said that in 1920, the Boston Red Sox traded Babe Ruth, who was then by far the greatest player in the league, traded him to the evil empire. It wasn't the evil empire yet, but the would become the evil empire known as the New York Yankees. So the idea is the Boston Red Sox were very short-sighted. They needed some cash, so they traded the Bambino to the New York Yankees, and for the next 100 years, they couldn't win a World Series. This legend built and was perpetuated by sports writers and the common sports fan to help explain every time the Boston Red Sox got close and maybe should have won the World Series but fell short, then the myth that was told was that it's all due to the curse of the Bambino and the mistaken trade from the 1920 season. And while that may have been seen by some as almost a negative myth, when the Red Sox finally won the World Series, I think in 2008, that myth actually helped unite the culture and bring Boston sports fans together in an even stronger way, because the curse was lifted and they were finally able to win the World Series. So not only are symbols images, and not only are they ideas like a vision and a value and a myth, but symbols are also people. So leaders and organizations who operate well in the symbolic frame put forth heroes and heroines, men and women who are icons who live out the core values and serve as living symbols for others in the organization, and they point everyone in the organization toward living out the positive aspects of the organization's culture. And in doing this, they inspire, they motivate, and they reinforce the very culture that they're building. Here's a quick and recent example from the graffiti artist out of New York, we believe, but nobody really knows who he is. So some of you may have heard of him. This guy's name is Banksy. We think it's a guy. But he goes and creates art that gives social commentary and provides deep meaning. One of his latest pieces of art, you'll notice if you look closely, is commentary on who our heroes and heroines currently are in the world. So here we see a powerful image of a little boy who puts some of his old heroes, Batman and Spider-Man and probably Superman, aside and grabs for what is becoming the new hero, the healthcare worker. So this is a nurse who now has a cape and is flying and has supernatural abilities that the old superheroes used to have. And maybe they still do, but the point is these heroes and heroines can change and should change over time as values shift, and especially as organizations may need newer and more refined heroes and heroines. So moving on to even more types of symbols. Not only are symbols people, but they're also occasions and processes. So the very ceremonies and rituals that teams go through and that organizations go through can also serve to build and reinforce culture. If you can see it here, this is the president of CBU, Dr. Ellis, and this is the dean of the School of Engineering, or the College of Engineering. When they were building what is now the engineering building, these gents posed for a picture, and if you notice, they're lancing up, they're throwing up the image of CBU, which came out of athletics, but is now universal, a symbolic of kind of Lancer pride and the CBU culture. So something as simple as a ribbon-cutting ceremony dedicating a building can be an important opportunity to create culture, and as we'll see later, to enact drama that reinforces a positive culture and inspires and brings meaning to people. Of course, down here we see in the sport world things like opening days in the various professional leagues. And for those who have been to these ceremonies, they certainly are grand occasions to celebrate certain cultures that we love, that are focused on achievement, and especially if our team is winning and we're excited about the upcoming season, they can provide a strong level of inspiration and meaning. And next, more specific daily activities like rituals can give structure and deep meaning to daily life. And these symbolic daily activities can be what we might call mundane or secular, or they can be either more sacred and religious. On the everyday mundane side, think about a sports team and the rituals that they go through in their pregame warm-up. Everything from Notre Dame college football, they slap a sign as they're heading out of the locker room. Some of you have seen it. The sign says, "Play like a champion today," and all the football players tap it on their way out. Or even encouraging each other during the warm-up. This was a CBU men's basketball from a couple years ago. I would hear players just keep saying, "Get your touches, get your touches." And it didn't mean get your looks within the game. It meant high five and encourage and physically respond to each other, even in the middle of normal routine warm-up activities before the actual game started. And rituals can also be more sacred or religious, especially, let's say, at a place like CBU. Often athletics teams will pray before practice, as well as before at key moments of the season, before certain games or at the start of the season, as a way of bonding and comfort and a reminder of the values that people share in common. So hopefully you're noticing these sorts of everyday activities occur almost without us even thinking about it. And that's the point. The symbolic frame recognizes the value of these procedures and says that these symbols are valuable ways of making sense of the world and accomplishing goals and strategy in everyday life in a way that provides meaning. So, chapter 13 was all about the different types of symbols, images, people, processes that create meaning and that anchor an organization by giving it soul. And chapter 14 deals with acting out that culture through a process called drama and theater. And this chapter focuses on how leaders in the symbolic frame stage reality through theater and through enacting drama to build confidence, to restore hope sometimes in the middle of complexity, and to even reassure people that things will be okay during times of high emotion. And it does this through sometimes normal and everyday processes that produce drama, and then sometimes larger, very infrequent, occasional processes like the ceremonies that we talked about a couple slides ago. You, as an effective leader in the symbolic frame, are always looking for opportunities to either create meaning or reinforce meaning through living out the values and the vision and all the symbols that we talked about over the last short while. The next several slides will unpack what drama looks like and how organizations put on drama and theater. So I'll just highlight a couple of thoughts and then we'll be done. The first thought is that organizations operating in the symbolic frame through drama and theater focus more on appearance than on performance. And this might be the case when performance is either lower than expected or goals weren't accomplished, and we still want to send a message that all is well and that our team and our organization is still accomplishing its goals and that the future is bright and that we're still operating according to our core values. And we show people, both internal people on the team and external people who are supporters of the team or organization, we show them that all is well in a few different ways. But the important thing is that all of these ways should be the organization acting as it's expected to act, living out its values, going through the normal processes that people expect of it, and in the way that people expect. So for example, a college like CBU, a private college where tuition is rather expensive, as you know, and we're trying to get external people to see the value that their investment has, then we might pay special focus on the beauty of the campus. And something as simple as planting new flowers and getting campus ready for graduation becomes a drama, becomes a stage here where we create credible drama that reinforces and reassures people that their investment is worth it, that their return on investment will not only meet their expectations, but exceed them. Think especially for those who have been recruited to an athletics team, what your campus visit looked like and how coordinated it was, and how much of a theater really and drama occurred as you visited campus for a couple of days, as you took tours, you ate the food in the cafeteria, you met key people, heroes and heroines, Notice how all those symbols enfolded your perception of CBU, if it was CBU that recruited you, or some other college. And notice that it wasn't by accident, but that this was probably pretty choreographed by assistant coaches, and even the larger athletic director and the president of the university, who supports the whole drama of the athletics department. So for those who operate well in the symbolic frame, you already know all that I'm saying. The key is for those who may not see the world primarily through the story of the symbolic frame, for you to start paying attention to it, for you to realize that the symbolic frame can be a powerful tool for seeing options and solving problems in organizational life, and especially problems that challenge people's motivation or leave them feeling uncertain about the future. During these times is when the symbolic frame can be especially effective in inspiring and recasting the vision in a way that motivates people to stay the course. So hopefully over the last 30 minutes I've convinced you that the symbolic frame can be effective and can be a useful tool, like all the frames, as a way of seeing daily life in organizations. In this case, seeing the organization and the team like a theater or even a temple where meaningful, almost religious or soulful activities can occur. And then secondly, once you see the organization from the perspective of meaning, then arriving at options and working towards solutions that inspire and create meaning for those who are a part of the team. So that's all for now, by way of introduction to the symbolic frame. I encourage you again to continue reading in your textbook and reviewing the PowerPoint presentation in Blackboard, and then reaching out to me and your classmates in your groups related to questions as you continue on your assignments. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.